Well, it's that time again. It's Real Estate Jerky Live. I'm your host, Ed Parcaut, and this is an extension of the radio show that we do on the weekends. And we want to go more in depth with different agents and people we've had on the radio. Today, we have Mike McClanahan. He's an agent with Remax Executive. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, Ed. How are you?
You know, it's a different day. You know, they say if you want to, want change, work in an environment with change, work in the mortgage industry. I think the same thing in the real estate industry. It changes constantly. Yes. And, and if you look at where we were a year ago at this time versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it's drastically changed. So
it feels crazy. It's felt crazy all year long.
All right. And today's show was about how to price your house right. I had a different tagline or whatever, how to sell your house for the best price. I think one of the things we have to talk about is what you should do, but also take into effect where the market is and what's happening with the market. Okay. Right. I mean, don't you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, the way I price houses today versus 6 months or a year ago, it's different. The prices are changing so fast and the inventory is so low, the demand so high. You have to kind of adapt to the current situation and roll with it. So it's definitely different now.
Right. And so let's show people what we're talking about, difference in inventory. So if you don't mind, you do mind at all?
Yep.
If I bring up a couple charts. All right.
Yep.
So I'm going to add. All right. So this is our inventory level for single family homes from 2020 to 2021. In 2020, we thought we had an inventory issue, right?
And now look at 21. It's crazy.
Right. So you look at, single family homes in March of last year of 2020, we had 1.3 million homes. This March, we had 900,000 homes. This is across everywhere. And so that's one of the issues with the inventory levels. That is, and all right, I'm going to kick this out of there. So that's one of our biggest problems, right? Is the inventory level.
Yeah. So if you're working with buyers and your buyers are getting frustrated, this helps explain why you're doing everything you can to show them all the available houses. It's just there's not a lot of available houses to look at that fit their criteria. So as a buyer, you have to be really patient and just don't give up. If you keep at it, you'll eventually get that property. But it's not like it was a couple of years ago.
Well, not even like it was a year ago. I mean, here's another one that shows. I mean, this is your normal, right? And we're usually up here, right? And now we're down
it's all
here.
Negatives.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And that's the issue we're running into. Is we have hardly any inventory. So
and you can talk to any realtor out there that's working with buyers, and they'll look at that chart and shake their head like, "Yep, that's what I'm seeing out there."
All right, and I got one last chart to really emphasize this. All right, it's the same thing about inventory. And let me just bring it up real quick. Does that tell you where the problem is?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Look, so and if you look at 2012 on 2011, your issue here is you're just, these are all right. So this is, if you can't see it real close, that right here is 2016. This is 2014, right? We had a lot of inventory in 2014,
right?
And then we got a decrease in inventory, and then we go through all of 2018, which seemed like a really bad time. Right. And then
in hindsight, I wish we could go back to that level now.
Right. And then you see here where we're actually up above that until about end of 2019, middle of 2019. And we thought we had a shortage of inventory. And then now this is where we're at. We're at, 21 January, February of 21. And that's where we're at. So.
Yeah. The inventory's been low for quite a while, but we kind of adapted to it. And then the last year and a half, it's just been extreme. So it's like you're adapting to an even lower level. And so right now it's just really can be frustrating from the buyer's standpoint. Not for the seller, but for the buyer.
Right. So let's talk about the buyer. So the seller's standpoint. All right. So what you're telling me, we're showing them there's a shortage of inventory. So the average seller is going to say, price my house. If you think it's worth 400,000, price it for 480.
Yeah. You have to be careful because you can still shoot too high. The trick is to kind of find that sweet spot where potential buyers will see the property, they'll like the property, they'll look at the list price, and it looks reasonable. Okay, if you price it too crazy, they're going to look at that house, and they're looking at other houses. So they're looking at other houses at 480. And if they look at your house that's listed for 480 and they compare it to everything else, and yours is nowhere near as nice, they're probably not going to even bother going through the house. So even though you have low inventory, and you think you can price for anything, you really can't. And then the second thing is the appraisals. You do all this work to get the right buyer in contract. You do the showings, you negotiate the terms, you get in contract, and you're priced too high just to have an appraisal kick it out. And there's things you can do with appraisals, trying to get the buyers to waive the appraisal or put in a low appraisal guarantee, but not everyone's willing to remove an appraisal. So again, if you price it wrong, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
So basically what we're saying is, and I'm sorry, I'm all over the charts because I found a ton of charts, and I think it really puts that, emphasis out there where we are in this market. Because one other one I brought up, I think about a week or so ago, because everybody keeps talking about, well, this can't last forever. This is gonna, we're gonna come back, and this is it. And this was the one I showed a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about homes built by a decade, and it just really brings it home why we don't have enough inventory and what our issue is, right? And so with this, so basically as a seller, and the reason I keep bringing this up instead of getting right in how to price stuff is these are all things sellers are thinking about when they go to sell their house, right? They're like, I have all this stuff that helps me, so I could price it at anything, and I should be able to sell my house at anything.
Yeah, it's going to influence your pricing strategy. And as a seller, if you see on the news that we're at all-time low new home starts, that's going to embolden you to price a little higher. But again, you have to kind of come back to reality. You have to price it at a reasonable price for that market, and then negotiate the best terms possible.
Right.
So,
all right. So I'm going to do one last chart, and then we're just going to go into how somebody can sell a house. All right.
Okay.
I say that, and you know me, I'll probably bring another one up.
That's okay.
But here's the perspective. All right. So this is again why we're here. Why is it going to continue? So if you look at prospective home buyers planning to buy a home in the next 12 months, it's the highest it's been over at a year, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. And so that tells you we're going to have a lot of people looking. Well, then you also have the Biden administration who's thinking about doing the $15,000 tax credit for you to buy a house, right? The issue really, okay, that's great, but why don't we work on the real issue, right? The chart before, which is how to build homes. So why don't we do this? Take the same amount of money and give it a credit to every builder towards fees, every city towards their fees, and have a discount. So that means if you want to if you want to build a house, if you want to build homes, you have a discount on your fees. That way they can build more homes and get things done, and actually maybe speed up the process. But I'm a dreamer.
Maybe you should get into politics, maybe.
Well, that's why I do a radio show. I guess that's the closest I'm going to be.
Yes, I don't know.
Because I can say certain things, and then people get mad at me, and then they send me emails and other stuff. But
I feel your pain.
Yeah. All right. So as a seller, all right, what should I? Okay, I hear all this noise. I see how great it is. I should be able to write any number. So if I'm going to, I think the first thing they need to do, we talked about, is price it right. Right. Sure. So how do you do that?
Yeah, let me do this. Let's walk through that. I get a phone call from a prospective seller, calls me up, says, Mike, I'd like to sell my property. Here's my address. I'll kind of walk through my process. So the first thing I do is I just pull up the property records, the tax records, so I can look at sizes, the square footage of the property, the year, the number of bedrooms, baths. So I get some basic information on the property. And then I'll go into the Metro List, our listing service, and I'll type in the address to see if there's any recent sales, because that'll show me some recent photographs and I can see what it sold for last. But I'm not always going to get that information because it may be a homeowner that's been there for 20 years. But I will use the Metro List to type in the address and do a radius search where I can go out a quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 of a mile in that specific neighborhood and look for recent solds. And then I can tweak it and say, let's say the house I'm getting ready to sell is a 2,000 square foot home, 4-bedroom, 3-bath. I can put that criteria and say, hey, let's show me all the houses that have sold in the last, let's say 4 to 6 months that are 15 to 2,500 square foot. So I'm in the general size of the house and I'm in the same neighborhood. The most important thing to do is comp it with similar properties. But when those properties pop up, I can look at them and I get a ballpark for what those homes are selling for. And then I try to use the most recent solds. So if I'm looking back for 6 months, and if I come up with 30 properties, I'll just narrow that. I'll say, give me the last 3 months. That's going to be more accurate. And if in the last 3 months I can come up with, let's say, 8 or 10 properties, that should be sufficient to help me come up with accurate pricing. So I do all this stuff before I meet with the client. So this gives me a ballpark of what that neighborhood's going for, because I haven't seen the individual property yet. So I may walk into it, it might be in terrible condition, or it might be really improved. So in my head, I've got a ballpark, what I think it's worth, and then I'll go meet with the client, walk the property with them, let them tell me their story, let them tell me about the property, what they've done to it, maybe get some information on why they're selling. It gives me a better idea of their motivation. And then based on what I'm seeing, I'll go back and I'll kind of tweak that price range to come up with a list price. So, and again, going back down to just pulling a number out, you still have to be in the zone of what the true market value is, what the current value is, versus just picking a number. If you do that, if you price it too high, you can still hurt yourself. You want to come out on the market, priced right, so you get the most activity up front. It's kind of, we call it the sweet spot. When you first come on the market, that's when you get the most eyes on it. And if I'm 100 grand overpriced, I might miss that window, and all those eyes looking at the property look at it as overpriced. And so even if I do a price adjustment 2 weeks later, those people may or may not see it. And so I've just lost a big opportunity on exposure for that property.
I read an article, and it said that when you find out that what your price is going to be for the market, right, you should then price it 15 to 20% under market to get a bidding war.
Okay, 15 to 20% is a big difference, right. But I'll tell you, okay, so sitting down with the seller, we can talk strategy. I can come up and say, hey, listen, I think this is what your current true value is. This is a number where I think you're not going to have any problem with the property appraisal. And then it's like, okay, how quickly do you want your house to sell? Or I mean, you're in no hurry, or you need to get going now. So you might say, let's say the true value is $500,000. You might say, well, listen, let's list it for $490. So all the potential buyers will look at it and go, wow, that's a nice house for $490, because they're comparing it to other houses in that price range. You're going to get more people looking at it. You're going to get more people scheduling viewings. And as they're coming through the house and they see the value, they go, wow, this house is priced good. It's a value. You want the buyer to see a value too, not just the seller. So you want the buyer to look at it and say, this is a nice house for that price. And what that's going to do is that's going to motivate them, because more than likely they've been beat out of a half a dozen houses by this time. So when they talk to their agent, say, we want to write an offer, and you say, well, what do you want to come in at? Say, well, it's listed for $490. And if they've been beat out a bunch, they may come say, let's start at $515. And as a seller, you're going, awesome, this is what we want. We want to price it low enough where we get good traffic to the property, and then you get multiple offers. Now, as a seller, when those multiple offers come in, if you've got more than one offer, it's easier for you to negotiate better terms, time frames, inspection periods, maybe possession after close, all those things that make the sale more convenient to the seller, you can get. If you only have one offer, sometimes it's a little harder to get all those terms that are completely in your favor.
All right. So then as a seller, you have all this information, right? And then I said, well, last chart, but I lied. So right now, average number of offers received on the most recent closed sales, right?
Yes.
So this is saying the average, you're going to get we'll just round it up, 5 offers, right? But okay. It's a unique, this is nationwide, right? This isn't just California. This is just nationwide. So they look at everything. So here it could be worse. I hear stories of, 10, 15 offers.
I think it's all about the price range. There's certain price areas that the demand is so high that if you're the listing agent, for example, if I listed a property tomorrow for $325, I better be ready for it. Because if that house is worth $325 and it's in that category, there's so many buyers in that price range, I'm going to end up with 24 offers. And to tell you the truth, from the seller standpoint, I don't really want 20 offers. That's just, I hate to say it, that's just so much work. I have to review all those offers. I have to talk to all those agents. I have to talk to all those lenders. Then I have to sit down with my seller and review 20 offers. It's just overwhelming. So if I have 20 offers, I probably priced it too low, because I've got, but again, going back, certain price range, you're going to get a lot anyway, because you'll get people writing offers without even seeing the property, because they're like, they've been beat out so many times at this price range. They're like, hey, for $325, I'll give you $340 right now without even seeing it. And, so you have to talk to your seller about those type of buyers too. But
all right. So if it's in that, so basically we're talking about FHA price point, right? Basically is what we're looking at. So anything in the FHA, no matter where it is, nationwide, is probably in that same scenario, right?
Yes.
And so basically those are the ones that there's a ton of buyers in that marketplace. And what a lot of people don't realize is because this whole market has changed, they think those people have a lower FICO score, right? Than than most places. But go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, no, go ahead. I was just say they may, but they may not. They may have a good credit score regardless, but.
Right. It's changed a lot. Most offers and most things going on right now by loan amount, I could bring up the chart, but I said I won't, is like at least on FHAs on average, the 680 FICO score, right? Which is usually FHA goes, 620, 640. But I have to say after this pandemic's hell, I tell everybody your FICO score is the most important thing. So please, let's work on that to get it up so that we can get it easier, better rate, better everything for you. So,
okay, good. Yeah.
Anyway, enough of me. So a lot of people go, okay, this is, Texas, all these other places, the best place to move to, we're all leaving California. But what a lot of people, all right, one more chart. I know I said no more, but you know how it is. Don't listen to me. All right. So this is average days on the market. Looks to me like it's pretty even everywhere, except for Alaska, Idaho, all those places. Those are, only less than 15 days on the market. Everywhere else is 15 to 30 days on the market. What are you seeing out there in our area?
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back down to if the house shows well and is priced right, it's probably going to be in contract within a week.
Right.
So but sometimes as a seller, as a listing agent, you need a little more time just to go through those offers, negotiate things. So on the Metro, it might show it's been on the market. It took 15 days to go pending, but there may have been 5 days of negotiating back and forth with a couple of people. You may pull the property off the market active and put on hold for a little bit while you do this, just to stop the demand of the showings. But again, if it's priced right and the house shows well, so you're getting lots of activity, you're probably in contract in under 2 weeks. I would say probably closer to a week.
All right. So I want to go back a little bit. So we were talking about how to price it right and how you check comps and you do everything. And one of the things we talked about before the show, this a couple of days ago, how even if you price it right today, you could have priced it wrong in 30 days from now.
That's because the market's moving so fast. And so, I'll give you an example. I just closed a property last week off Snyder, and the number that I came up with on comps was lower than what we listed it for based on that. And what I told my sellers is there's no houses in this area this size right now. So literally there's maybe 2 other properties that we would be competing against, and those houses are way overpriced. So we were at a huge advantage. If there's anybody looking to move into that area in that price range, we were kind of the only house. So we padded it up. We came in about 25 grand higher than what I thought it comped at. And then after we got multiple offers, we accepted an offer of $50,000 over that.
Oh, really?
Yes. And again, it was nowhere did I feel I never would have come up with that list price, that what we eventually settled on.
Right.
But we had a motivated buyer who I recognized the buyer coming through a house I'd sold 2 months earlier. So they've been looking for months, and they came in real aggressive. They waived a bunch of stuff that they probably shouldn't have waived. But from the seller standpoint, these guys were taking it as is. They weren't going to do inspections, which is crazy. They didn't need an appraisal, which is kind of crazy. But for my seller, it was very advantageous to him. So it all worked in his favor, and the buyer was super motivated. So we negotiated some terms and we closed it. So
what you're saying is
true value that, I never would have listed it for that price because I couldn't support that. But again, knowing that every day other houses are closing, so those comps that the appraisers are using, there's new comps coming on every day. So you really don't know what the comps are going to look like 30 days down the road.
Right. So what we're saying, so actually sellers are making way more money profit on houses this year, which is automatic. We know.
Yeah, definitely potential for that. Yes, definitely potential for that. So.
But it just depends on where's the house located, what other properties are for sale, and how is it set up. Because we just had an appraisal come in on a $1.5 million scenario, and the appraisal came in 100 and some thousand over that, and they thought that it was not even going to make the 1.5 million. So that tells you on certain things. And this is something that's closed a few months ago. I said now, but it is. Anyway, and that's okay. So my next question is, if you're trying to price a house and you're trying to sell a house, you guys can't call other agents and say, hey, what'd you get on that? Blah, blah, blah.
No, actually, okay. So this is what I'll do. So when I'm reviewing comps, and again, there's only, let's say if I find 3 or 4 houses that are good comps, I look at the numbers, okay. And then in that same area, I see there's 3 or 4 properties that are pending. And I look at the history, I say, wow, all these properties went pending with multiple offers in under a week. Okay, so I want to talk to those agents. So I make some phone calls and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm getting ready to list a property in the neighborhood. I see you're pending. Can you let me know what you guys settled on? And sometimes the agents will tell you, sometimes they don't. A lot of times the agents don't want to reveal that, because if it does fall out of escrow, they don't want people to know what they accepted, because it might hurt them on the next deal. But I think most agents, and if they, this is a small community, we know each other. So if I'm calling somebody that I know, they'll typically share it. And they know that I'm using this to bring another property in the market, which they may have a buyer for. So I'll take that information, which is more accurate. So it's not what's shown on the Metro, but it's what they're in contract for. So if that property closes, that'll be a new comp.
Right.
So that'll help me adjust upwards or downward based on those pending properties that have not closed yet. So that'll help me adapt to that.
And I know that some agents will or won't, but you would think legally or NAR or CAR, they have no problem with it, right? It's okay to disclose that ahead of time.
Yeah, no. You're not revealing anything that you're not supposed to.
Okay. I just want to be clear, so people think that you're not supposed to do that. So
I know for me my only hesitancy on sharing that would be that if my current deal falls apart and I come back on the market, I may not want those agents that call me to know what we accepted before, because they may come to me with an offer from their client and they know what we accepted before. So it gives them an advantage. So, it's going to depend. If I just got in contract, I may not talk about it, but if I'm 10 days into contract or we've removed all the contingencies on the deal, I don't have any problem sharing it.
Well, I mean, and it also helps keep the market moving up, right?
Correct.
So that way it doesn't all of a sudden, or someone gets mad because you didn't sell their house for the max that they could have gotten for the house, right?
Yeah. Again, it's just going to help you with your accuracy of what you can expect the property to maybe appraise for. Because again, once you get in contract and you start in the process and you've accepted an offer that's $10,000 over, now you're nervous about the appraisal, but you know that these other properties are high also, and those ones should be closing. And then you hope that the appraiser will reach out to those same agents who are bidding and say, hey, what are you in contract for? Or those properties close during the process. And so those are the newest comps, and that appraiser is going to want to use that new comp. And if that's a number that I know what the number is, and I use that to help me come up with my list price, that's going to help me have my property appraised and not have an appraisal issue.
Okay. All right, I know it's in the Bay Area a certain way, but here locally, are we doing a lot where they're doing appraisal contingencies are waived, all the inspection periods are waived? Is it depend on the house, the price point?
Yes and yes. So depends on the buyer, how motivated the buyer. I think a lot of it boils down to the buyer. If you've got a guy that's been searching for 4 months and has been beat out over and over, and he's talking to his agent going, what can we do to get our offer accepted? Suddenly they start lowering those bars and say, hey, listen, why don't we put $1,000 max on a repair request? Or let's do as is with no repairs, where you normally wouldn't have done that on your first offer, but now you're willing to do that because you're getting so frustrated. And in the last 3 months of you missing out, the prices have gone up, and you look back, go, gosh, had I gotten that first offer accepted, I just saved myself 20 grand because the prices have gone up that much. So when you think about it like that, it kind of makes sense to get a little more aggressive just to lock something down, but it is risky. And go back to the appraisals. Yeah, what I'm seeing is when people make offers over the list price, and I call up that agent and say, hey, listen, I got your offer, I appreciate it, but I see you're over the list price. And I'll say, what are you going to do about the appraisal? Because we listed this at a price that we thought the house was worth, and you're coming in over. I don't want to play the game of having you come up with some ridiculous high number just to get in contract, hoping that the appraisal comes in low, and then you want us to lower the price. We don't want to play that game. So let's talk about that right now. Go back to your buyer and say, what are you going to do if it doesn't appraise? I mean, are you going to ask for the reduced amount, or are you going to maybe put in some sort of guarantee? So I'm seeing a lot of this where if they're unable to waive the appraisal completely, which I totally understand, but they might say, buyer willing to pay up to $10,000 over a low appraisal, not to exceed the offer amount. And what that does is I can go back to my buyer, my seller, I'm sorry. If I've got 4 offers and only one person's doing that, and everybody else is Everyone's over list price, but there's only one guy saying, I'll pay you up to 10 grand over low appraisal. What do you think the seller's going to do? The seller, the seller's going to say, well, this one buyer is telling me up front because we don't know what it's going to appraise for. But if it doesn't appraise, I know this guy's going to pay me at least 10 grand over or up to 10 grand. And, that's a lot smarter position to be in as a seller than just crossing your fingers that it's going to appraise and then not have it appraise and then have the deal fall apart. So I'm seeing a lot of that.
So you're recommending if I'm going to write an offer and I'm writing over asking, then I put in there, I will go this X amount over appraised value up to my sales price that I just put my purchase price.
Obviously.
Contract.
Yeah, you're never going to pay more than your offer amount. Right. Again, let's say if you made an offer at 400 grand, the house was listed for 375, but you came in at 400 grand, you're coming in 25 grand over. That's kind of a big gap on that price range. And so we may have an appraisal issue, but if you say, listen, I'll pay up to 10 grand if it doesn't appraise. And so what that tells me is I've got at least a $10,000 pad there that with this particular buyer, without losing the deal, I'm going to be guaranteed to get at least 10 grand over low appraisal. Now the seller does not have to accept that number. If that number is still under the offer amount, the seller can still say, hey, listen, I appreciate you giving me $10,000 over, but your appraiser, I don't agree with. Your appraiser came in at 350. So the fact that you're willing to offer me 360, I'm not obligated to accept that. So it goes both ways. But again, like I said, it's from the seller standpoint, if you've got a buyer that's willing to put that in writing, that's a lot safer buyer to accept. And typically what'll happen is if you've got those 4 buyers on that property, you've probably gone back to everybody and suggested this if it wasn't already in the contract. Say, hey, listen, same conversation. I see you're over list price and we might have an appraisal issue. Talk to your buyer. If your buyer's comfortable, give me something in writing saying that you'll pay over a certain dollar amount or waive the appraisal, and I'll present that to my seller. And of the 4 people, if only one of them does it, you can kind of figure out who they're probably going to accept.
Right. All right. So it's typical when you're talking with your seller, you have you have 5 offers. One's all cash, but not at the, over the list price, right?
It'd be a lower number.
Right. Usually that's what they try to do. Right. And then you have 4 other offers, one a VA, FHA, and whatever. So it doesn't matter how high they go is what I'm hearing. It's about what are they going to guarantee on the value, because like you just said, what if it came in at 350 with an appraisal, because we're using comps, not me, but the appraiser comps from a couple weeks ago, but we know 2 more closing next week. I had a situation like this up in Pleasanton where the house was, one other unit in this complex was closing in 2 weeks, and it was closing 40,000 over asking because that's what they were going to, where the one that my buyer got into contract was at the list price, but we wanted that comp to show this one. So they waived the appraisal contingency, but then they waited and so it didn't matter when the appraisal was done. We waited till that one closed, rushed it and got it done. And that way they had the higher price.
Yes. And so if you know that's coming down the road and you can delay it a little bit, that's great strategy, because you're kind of assuring that we should not have an appraisal issue if we can use that comp. We don't always have that information, but if you have it, heck, use it to your advantage, right? So for sure. And, going back to different offers and different terms, cash is not always king. At the end of the day, my seller will tell me, that money's all the same to me once it hits my bank account. But what I have to do as a listing agent, I have to kind of explain to them the pros and cons of each of those offers. So as I'm explaining to them the pros of a cash offer versus a conventional FHA, VA, contingent buyer, it's ultimately up to the the seller to pick the offer. My job is to kind of guide them through all that, explain all the differences of the offers, and then go with what's in their best interest and support them. But again, the cash offer is not always the best offer. If your cash guy comes in low, but he wants a 60-day close because he's got something else going on, and your seller is trying to relocate, they might like the cash offer because they don't have to worry about an appraisal, but we don't have time to wait for you to close out your next deal for 60 days. So that may be off the table right off the bat.
So it's not only about pricing the house with the seller when you set that from the beginning, but how you are going to go through the different offers you guys receive through that process. And I think we were not really joking beforehand, but it's very difficult to be a buyer's agent these days, right? Because you're going to have your buyer write so many offers on average to get into contract.
Again, going back to the certain price ranges, they're really crazy. if you're a buyer's agent and you're listening to this, you're shaking your head that, you're showing so many houses and your buyers are getting frustrated and you're getting frustrated because you're showing all these houses. In every house, you have to sign disclosures about COVID. You have to make appointments. It's hard to schedule because there's a lot of people going to it. So it's a lot of work. So the buyer's agents are working their butts off right now just to show the properties, just to have their offers rejected left and right. So that's why people are kind of getting creative on doing things to their offers to make them more appealing. So again, you call up the listing agent if they'll talk to you and say, hey, what's your seller looking for? Let me see if I can help you. Do you need a rent back? Do you need, are you selling the washer, dryer, fridge? Whatever it is. And if you can find out what the seller's looking for, that might give you an advantage to put it into your offer and say, hey, listen, we're happy to give you a 2-week rent back at no charge at the close of escrow. And that takes the pressure off the seller on their move. And suddenly it's like, hey, these people look like they're going to be easy to work with, as opposed to the other people. When we ask about a rent back, they immediately said, absolutely not. We need to move in the next day. It's like, well, that's really stressful. So sometimes it's easier to say, those other people that were in a hurry, they were offering us more money. Let's go back to these other people, see if we can get the price up. But we like their terms because they look like they're easier to work with. So that might be the offer to go with. And honestly, it might not be the highest offer. So again, maybe you try to get them up another $5,000 and they come back and say, hey, listen, sorry, we love the property. We're willing to work with you guys, but this is our max that we can go with. And that might be okay. Because for your seller, it might be more important that you're working with us and you're not going to pressure us to get out because we have a delay on lining up movers, maybe something that's out of your control, but it creates a lot of internal stress for the seller to be pushed out. So it's like if you got a buyer that says, no, take your time. I'm renting month to month. I can give you guys lots of flexibility. And that might be your buyer right there.
Right. Because, and there's also people are offering to pay the sellers escrow and title fees and other stuff like that. Right. So,
yeah.
And
I just closed one of those that in Stanislaus County, we have a specific shared cost in escrow, which is common. And I had somebody come in and they offered to pay all the seller's closing costs. That means they paid their transfer tax, they paid all of escrow, they paid title. And it's like an extra $2,000 in fees. They were the only ones doing that. And so when you compared everything else, there's some similarities in their offers, but they're the only ones to offer up all the seller's escrow fees. And so it's an extra $2,000. Yeah. And so when I showed that to the sellers and I said, this is what we got. And luckily that buyer was also qualified. So it wasn't about taking a poorly qualified, weak buyer that offered us $2,000 that can get you in trouble.
Right.
But if it's a strong buyer still, and the pricing's similar, but they're adding that as a bonus, it's like, hey, as a seller, what would you do? You're going to look at the net. We'll run net sheets so I can show the seller what he's going to walk away with after his expenses. And you look at this and you go, wow, this is an extra $2,000-3,000. It's like, sure, let's go with them.
And just so you know, if you're the buyer doing that, I have the title company that you'll be going through to do that you'll be paying the same, you'll be paying less by doing that through this title and escrow company than if you go through some of the other big names. So there is a whole new strategy that I've come across for my buyers to offer that on their side, as long as we can pick the escrow and title company.
Yes, that's important. That's a good point, because if you're going to offer that, you need to say that up front, because normally when you go to list a property, the listing agent's already got an escrow opened. So they've already picked an escrow office and they've kind of started the process. And it's probably somebody that they're comfortable with, that they trust. But if you come up and say, hey, listen, we're willing to pay all your fees, but we want to use this escrow office because we have a relationship over there that's going to give us maybe a discount or whatever. And so you have to go back to your seller and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. This is what they're offering. But if we do this, we need to move over to that office. And the seller may not care. The seller's like, whatever. The listing agent may be more bothered because he's got an office that he likes to use. And so he's a little uncomfortable moving his deal over to an office that he may or may not be familiar with. So that might be a little bit of a challenge. But I think if you communicate with the listing agent and say, this is why we're doing this, because they're going to do this at this fee. And if he understands that you're not trying to take control of the deal, it's just that there's financial reasons why it makes sense. You can probably get them to go along with that. So.
Right. Even though by law, I'm just putting it out there, it is the buyer's choice for escrow and title, even though that doesn't happen all the time because of how even though it's a law.
It's all negotiable.
Right. Exactly. So I understand that. I'm getting there. Let me finish. Even though it says that way, but in this market, you can fight that point, but you won't win the escrow. But if you're willing to pay the escrow and title fees and save the seller's money,
yes,
most listing agents are going to say, hey, I don't care as long as it closes on time. And
yes,
because the title report and the insurance for it's the same no matter where you go. Escrow, what they do is the same. It's just a matter of how good the people are. And
again, your seller probably doesn't care.
No, they just care about money and closing, and it's no stress. So
yeah. And again, when you run the net sheets and you say, if we change offices with this particular buyer who's offering to do this, if we change offices, again, the seller probably doesn't care. So it's just a matter of making sure the listing agent understands what they're doing and that they know that up front. You wouldn't want to throw in that you're willing to pay all that stuff, get the offer accepted, and then come back and say, oh, by the way, we need you to switch offices. Because that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
Because it wasn't in the contract. And now the listing agent has no motivation to change offices. He's going to probably stay where he wants to stay. Mm-hmm. And you've just offered to pay for escrow at that other office.
Right.
So
and that can be every escrow title company has a different price point. So you have to be really careful. So just like every company. All right. I got 2 more charts. This is why we're going to still see more issues where we showed with that, the building. So we have the most people since 1978 coming out saying they're going to be buying a house this year.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah.
Good
for buyers.
More buyers.
So just what we need, more buyers. And then last one is this one, right? We're not in a bubble. It's it's a lack of supply, and that's what we're going to see going forward for a while. So any last, let me get us out of here.
Hey,
I can't get my mouse over there. Sorry, it's one of those days. Any last things you want to add?
Yeah, let me just add about the bubble. I get that question every once in a while because of, if you're a new buyer, you're coming in and you're thinking, gosh, this feels crazy. It's like back in 2007, completely different scenario. We had bad loans, bad owners, bad buyers, bad sellers. That's not what we have now. We have qualified buyers. We have good loans. We have cheap interest rates. We just have a lack of inventory on the seller side. So that imbalance is pushing these prices up. So it's a much safer time to get in to a home right now than it was back at 2007 before the bubble. So this is not the same. It's not the bubble that we're talking about. Now, prices are up. I'll tell you, if you're just a buyer, prices are up, but they're up because of the lack of inventory. So, and honestly, from a buyer standpoint, you have to live somewhere. So you're either paying an inflated purchase price on a house or you're paying inflated rent. And, at least if you're purchasing a home, you're getting something out of it. If your rent's going up every month, you're not getting ahead in life. So it's still better to own the house.
Right.
To make sure you can afford the payments. So.
And if you look here, right. Yeah. So
months of inventory.
Yeah. So this is 2011, right?
Okay. Wow.
And then now here we are today.
Yeah. That just illustrates what we're seeing in the market. When you go out there and you make an appointment on the house has been on the market for one day, you go to make an appointment, it's difficult to get in because they're already booked. This is why, because you've got 40 other agents who've already called before you on the first day to schedule. And the listing agent's like, whoa, hold on, slow down. It's hard to schedule showings. And then they pull the house off the market so they can catch up. It's crazy out there right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything you want to add before we go? Because I think we've talked a lot about because one of the things I didn't want to get in about today about sellers, right? Clean, get rid of the clutter, clean up your house, do the front of the house, all that kind of stuff you should do no matter what. You go to sell a house, declutter it, take everything out of the closets, leave a few things, get everything out of the house, clean it up, make it look nice. If you don't live in the house, stage the house, put it on the market, and then how do I price it? That's what I cared about more today.
A good point, because even though the market's it's out of balance right now, so it's a seller's market, you still have to do the basics. So you still have to make your house look good online. You want good professional photographs. You want to declutter. You want good curb appeal. When it goes online, people are going to see it online. They're going to look at the photos, and they're probably going to go drive by the house also. So if you have 5 cars parked in front of your house and the lawn hasn't been mowed in a while, and even though you think it's priced fair, but it's still $50,000 over value, your phone's not gonna be ringing off the hook. So buyers are not stupid. Buyers are out there looking at everything out there. So you still need to put the effort in, make your house look good, price it right. And from a seller standpoint, don't think don't pick the agent that's gonna tell you that you can get the most for your house, because that's a mistake. If you're talking to multiple agents about listing your property And one guy's saying, I think the fair market value is 500 grand. And some other guy says, hey, I'll sell it for 6. They should not be that far apart. And so as a seller, don't automatically go for the agent who says he can get you more money, because he may be just saying that to get the listing. And, you know, they listed for 600 grand. And when you don't get any phone calls in 2 weeks, he's going to call you up and say, hey, Mr. Seller, you need to drop the price. Let's go to 500 grand. It's like, wow, that's an interesting number to drop it to, that the first guy offered. And, you know, that first guy was trying to give you an honest opinion on value. That's who you want to go with. Go with the agent you trust is giving you a fair market value. Come up with a game plan and stick to it.
Exactly. Hey, Mike, what's your cell number for people get it? Besides, they can message you through Facebook, but if they want to call you,
you can contact me directly at my cell at 209-985-0100. I'm at Remax in Modesto.
One more time.
209-985-0100.
I mean, it's really important to get a hold. I'm going to add this in here and then you can see it. But there's your number.
Thank you.
No problem. And I appreciate you coming on the show today just to go through this with me and let me, you know, have fun with all my charts. But it really shows where our market is and why is it not just going to stop all of a sudden like everybody thinks. I should just wait. I'll wait till this clears out in a year from now. I think those, you know, yes, there are some things that can happen in the next 6 months to a year with our government adding more programs to cause more inflation and stuff like that to cause interest rates to go up. But unless our interest rates go up to 6, 7, 8%, we're not going to see this type of a slowdown. But even with inflation jumping like it just did to 6%, you want to own an asset, right? A house is an asset that appreciates. You brought up one of the things I didn't want to interrupt you, but you were talking about if you don't buy, you're going to deal with inflated rent prices. There are people coming out and going, oh, you're renting it for just an example. There's hardly anything. $1,500. I'll give you $1,600 a month if you rent to me. No, I'll give you $1,700 a month if you rent to me.
Well, what I'm seeing is I'm talking with sellers who want to sell their house and then maybe go stay in a rental, and they can't find a rental. So it's like, you know, so they're trying to time the market, which is really risky. But the idea of like, I'm going to sell my house and put the money in the bank and I'm going to rent for a while. Well, before you do that, you might want to go check the rental market and see what's available. And you might be shocked on what they're renting for, because you might be thinking you're going to rent something for $1,200 and you're renting that same house for $1,800. And $1,800, maybe that doesn't make sense. So maybe you should just sell your house when you need to sell the house and don't try to time it. So.
All right. Thank you so much. Stay right there.
Thank everybody.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime you want to come on, just let me know. And you have anything you want to talk about, even if you have listings you want to put on, we can bring it up the next time. Again, thank you everybody for watching and listening. And if you're on YouTube with this, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back next Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we'll have the people from Graffiti, you know, putting on the Graffiti Festival. They'll be talking more about it. They're on this weekend's show. All right, Mike, thanks again. Stay right there.